and quality control in the molecular lab. It's a great time. We kind of talked about it already, but we're going to do it again. Because why not hone it in? When someone asks, do we read the lab procedures? Yeah, you need to read them. They're your best friend. All the information you need should be in the lab procedure. Just FYI. Sometimes they suck though, and your supervisors and senior techs may have to rewrite them. But if something is missing, always bring it to the attention of the senior tech or the supervisor or whoever is responsible for making adjustments to the SOPs. That way, if you have the question, chances are other people have also had the question, and it should be in the SOP. So, yeah, that's my tidbit on that. So read the lab procedures. They're your friends. They will always tell you what to do. They're there for a reason. If you ever think that you're just going to wing it, don't. Don't just wing it. Follow the SOP. Okay? Okay. CLIA. Bam. Regulates proficiency testing, test management, QC, personnel, and QA standards. The federal guidelines are regulated by CMS. Cab inspectors. They look for everything.
We just had a cab inspection on time, so.
How'd you do?
Good.
Good.
I wasn't there.
Great job. They're there just to make sure that you're on the up and up. You're doing everything you're supposed to be doing, that you're documenting like you're supposed to be documenting. There's no whiteout, no scribbles, right? You have everything. Your QC is valid. You're not releasing patient results without valid QC checks. They're there for a reason, right? They're there to make sure that people don't get misdiagnosed or treated when they didn't need treated or all that good stuff. It's a great time. Specimen handling. So, pre-analytical errors, erroneous or misleading results caused by events that occur prior to sample analysis. Okay, so provide guidelines for specimen handling in the lab policy is our requisition requirements. We list everything that we require, the collection, all the collection information, how much to collect, how to collect it. So things that are pre-analytical errors, drawing in the wrong tube, QNS, not enough, right? If it's hemolyze, that's a common one, right? For CCL, things like that. Proper labeling and identification. Label your specimens. Okay? Just label them. It's just a label. Just put it on. It's not that big world. Don't forget it. Listen, first time I collected my very first COVID specimen from the outpatient lab, never did it again. Had to call the patient back, and she was in for a pre-op procedure. Someone was even watching me because it was my first time collecting a specimen. They didn't even catch that I didn't label it. It got all the way to the lab, and then they called and they were like, bruh. So they were gone. She was like, this girl was cerebral palsy. She was like in a wheelchair. I felt so bad calling and asking them to come back because I sucked at life. Like, I have not labeled a specimen again. Just throwing that out there, that was traumatic enough for me because it wasn't just some Joe Schmo on the road who I'm like, I don't care if I have to make him come back. Like, I felt awful. So I'm glad it was a traumatic experience. The girl was fine. She was great. Dad was super understanding. But yeah, label your specimens, please. Learn from my mistake. Storage requirements. Don't freeze it if it can't be frozen. Don't heat it up if it can't be heated up. Good times. Yeah, examine specimens upon receipt. Make sure they're labeled. Make sure they're not QNS. Make sure it's the correct swab in the correct transport media. Okay? So, additives. None is a red top tube, right? Chemistry, serum, viral antibody studies. Sodium heparin tubes are green tops. Immunology and viral studies. Sodium heparin is a brown top. Cytogenetic studies, molecular studies, except. Is that it? Oh, because there's two different sodium heparins, right? Okay. We mainly use the green top. I was like, I've never seen a brown top here. I don't think we use the brown tops here. Who works in another lab? Have you ever seen a brown top? Yeah, me neither. Not gonna lie to you. EDTA. That's what we use all the time, right? Virology and molecular biology studies. Acid citrate dextrose, that's a yellow top tube, and that's molecular biology studies as well, but we don't use that. We haven't validated that tube type here. Specimen handling. Specimens of minimal cellular content are often analyzed, therefore cross-contaminating must be avoided. So we share specimens, right? All labs share specimens. Some areas don't have as stringent requirements as we do, and micro does. Micro also has very stringent requirements because you could contaminate something. Again, back to this contamination thing. We work in hoods like BSCs, biological safety cabinets. They spin plasma and blood in the open. They aliquot it in the open. Bro, like, no, okay? You got to make sure and be cognizant if you are processing a specimen for micro or molecular studies, cytogenetic studies. We have shared specimen labels here. So if something is shared, it should get a shared specimen label on it so that it makes the downstream lab aware that there was a potential. This was entered before. There may be a potential of contamination, just so we know that if something weird and wonky shows up, it may have been because it was entered previous to our sampling. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. Inspect blood samples for hemolysis, as this will reduce nucleic acid yield. Solid tissues are best analyzed when they are fresh or frozen. And the quality of nucleic acid from fixed tissue depends on the fixing process and the fixative used. That is a true statement. Some processes are not as great as others. That's okay though. Specimen handling of RNA. Benches and equipment of RNA must be in separate designated areas. Again, because RNases are ubiquitous. We should not be processing them in the same areas as everything else. Again, we need to add RNase inhibitors and extra caution not to contaminate, including contact with bare skin. Okay. Specimen storage. If we store DNA, okay, if we have a whole blood, buffy coat, bone marrow, or fluids, we can store them at room temperature for 24 hours, 2 to 8 degrees for 72, -20 for at least a year, and -70 for more than a year. Again, it depends on the purity of preparation and like if there's other junk in there that shouldn't be, right? Because if there's junk in our DNA elution, then it might not be as stable for as long. Tissue, 20 to 25 degrees C is not recommended. You want to keep it, unless it's fixed already, that's different, okay? But if it's fresh tissue, 2 to 8 for up to 24 hours, -20 for at least 2 weeks, and -70 at least 2 years. Microorganisms in culture, room temperature, 24 hours, 2 to 8, 72, -20, 2 to 4 weeks, and -70 for more than a year. And cell lysates, again, room temperature for 1 to 2 weeks. So, to assure a high quality sample, refrigeration and freezing is recommended. And lab procedures should include optimal storage conditions, which they should. So should the collection instructions. RNA, though, is a little bit different. RNA is not stable at room temperature, okay? Again, because of RNases, unless collected in a specific RNA tube. And lab procedures should include, again, optimal storage conditions. So, yeah, again, not recommended. You can have fluids, 5 days. RNA protection tubes, 7 days in the fridge, right? There are different collection requirements. Again, not recommended, not recommended, not recommended for tissues, right? Again, Oh, why is this not? I keep trying to use the mouse to point things out, and obviously it's not working out. How do you slice a pointer? I think I know by now. So we have things that are, again, not recommended unless you have specific extra precautions taken, right? You have cell lysates here. We're good to go. Precautions, all specimens are potentially infectious. That is overall every single thing in the lab, not just molecular, right? Don't take a blood tube and drink it. It's Halloween, but you're not a vampire, okay? Should wear your PPE. Please, please, please. It's there for a reason. It's also important to avoid specimen contamination. So not only are you protecting yourself against whatever's in the tube, you're protecting whatever's in the tube against you. Those are required when handling RNA to protect from nuclease degradation. And respirators, we're all familiar with these bad boys, right? Because of COVID, are used with airborne or contact transmissible agents. So if you're collecting a COVID specimen from somebody, you are required to get fit tested for a respirator. Yes? Do you work at hospitals? So you're all required to get fit tested. Yes? Beautiful. Beautiful. And everybody's face is different, so everybody gets a different respirator. Contact precautions for direct patient care. Okay, so they can have, like, again, respirators, face shield, gowns, gloves, booties, right? Protect yourself. Test performance, federal regulations require validation of the performance of clinical test methods and reagents and accurately to testing analytes prior to use. For commercially developed methods, the lab or the vendor share responsibility validating the test. So the vendor is going to be like, here, I validated this using a bajillion different things, and here's the 20 samples that you're going to validate it in your own lab following these processes that are divinely outlined. Okay? It's very minimal effort on the labs and to go through a validation from a commercially developed test method. Now, if you are doing LDTs, which are lab developed tests, that is a completely different story. You have to do the whole shebang because there is no company doing it for you. Okay, you validate that your probes and primers are binding in the right spots. You're validating that the positive results are truly positive and the negative results are truly negative. Sometimes you, if you're validating it, you have to send the same samples that you're running on your assay to, let's say, Mayo Clinic and pay them to run it as well and hope that you get the same results, right? Or sometimes you buy specimens from them that they ran. You say, please send me 20 specimens that span the linear range of my assay, and hopefully you get concordant results and it's good and you can validate it. Versus like the company has already done that part, they're giving you it, you're just repeating it and it's done, right? So it's easier to go with a commercially available kit, but that doesn't make it better. Just saying. Sometimes there are limitations, like commercially available kits. Sometimes you have to have high testing volumes, and that is something that we don't have. So in order for it to make, like, you have to buy like 600 tests at a time, like per kit. We don't even run 600 tests in a year. So we're like throwing away like so much of it, and it has certain expiration date. It's just a waste of money. So it's easier for us to do our lab developed tests. Yes, it's a little bit more time investment and money investment maybe in the beginning, but it saves us money in the long run. Because we can buy smaller quantities of things, prepare them as needed, and do those things. So test validations are performed on the types of specimen that will be encountered in routine use of the test. If you're gonna always run plasma, you have plasma better be in your validation, right? VALs, urines, things that you're commonly encountering. I will tell you, we got a specimen for vitreous fluid the other day, right? That was not a part of our validation. We had to put a comment in our report that says this test was not validated for this specimen type, right? Like CYA, like you pushed us, we tried to reject it, but nobody else really had any, you couldn't even send it for it. Like, so we're gonna run it for you, but just know it's not validated and you might not get results, right? We don't know if there's inhibitors in that vitreous fluid. We don't know what else is in there that like may affect our downstream testing process. So we can't actually say that these are truly valid results. A negative may truly not be a negative, right? So you have to CYA. You should validate it if you think you're going to run it. You can't validate every specimen type in the world. That'd be ridiculous. Number of specimens tested varies with the procedure and availability of the test material. So a lot of times for like general testing, it's very easy. You could run 40, glucoses. Easy. It's easy to get glucose specimens to run. You could literally, I could sit in here and run your blood, all of you, and I'd be halfway done with my validation, right? Like, because you need 40 specimens typically to run for a validation. Now, if specimens are hard to acquire, like Behen's tissue is a very hard to acquire. We get like 6 a year, maybe. And other places that run Behen's, they only get the number of scrolls that they need. So like if they need a scroll of FFP, like 5-micron cut of scrolls, they're using it all and running it. If we need to validate an extraction method, we need the scroll to begin with to validate that we can extract it. Right now, we're trying to validate a new extraction method for FFPE for Behen's assay because our one extraction method is going to be not available for purchase anymore starting March 2024. Haven't been able to find a kit that has produced equivalent results. Also, it's very hard to come by those samples. I don't want to use all of our samples because we have to get those samples for competencies. We also have to use those blocks. There's only a number of slices that you have per block. And only out of those 6 per year, only maybe a few are positive, right? So like we have to use those sparingly. So we might not have 40 positives and negatives in our validation plan because the specimen is very hard to come by. Does that make sense? So if you can justify it, if you can do it, you should do it. 40, great, beautiful. But there are some instances where it's very hard to come by and the medical director has to justify why they used a less number of specimens. Results from new methodology are compared to results from established procedures and correlated with clinical diagnosis. Again, correlation. You're comparing it to previous results run by somebody else or a different method, your previous method, if you're updating the method. Test validation, commercially developed and FDA-approved molecular methods are verified by using the purchase reagent sets to test the validation. They give you them. They say, here you go. Merry Christmas. Run them. And it should be easy peasy lemon squeezy. If the lab modifies the commercial test, a validation is required to show equal or superior performance. So when we went with EUAs for COVID, we modified the collection media, okay? Viral transport media is not all created equal from various companies. They were also on short supply, right? So we validated a few extra collection medias. So we had to run equivalency and bridging studies because we couldn't get the media from that was validated in the EUA, the emergency use authorization. So even though they gave us supplies to validate the test because it was commercially available, we still had to do extra studies on top of the studies that they initially gave us. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. So once the procedure has been established, the method is documented in the lab according to CLSI guidelines, and test validation is ready to be implemented. It's a clinical test. So we'll look at all these different things. Measurements of test performance. You have to look at sensitivity. You have to look at not only analytical sensitivity, but clinical sensitivity. How does that actually relate? Is it good enough? Is the sensitivity good enough? Is it not good enough? Is it clinically indicated? Do we need to go down to 5 viral copies? Do we need to make it more sensitive, or is 500 good enough? Right? If you're not experiencing symptoms, if you have 5 viral copies, there's no point in maybe trying to make your assay more sensitive. But maybe there is. Detection limit, right? You have to establish an LOD. Specificity, you have to do specificity studies. Make sure it doesn't cross-react with anything else that you are trying to detect. Precision, right? Reproducibility, the AMR, the analytical measuring range. We talked about that, how you need to have high, mids, and lows to validate your whole measuring range. The reportable range. If it's above, it's positive, but it's above your linear range, you still have to say, like, yes, we detected it, but it's above our linear range. We can't give you a quantity. The instrument will give you a quantity. That doesn't mean you should report it. Also, if it's low, the instrument will still give you a quantity, but you should not report it, right? You should say below the limit of detection. So, yes. Or below the linear range, I'm sorry. The reference range, what you should be expecting, right? The reportable range is like 15 to 100,000 or whatever million IUs per mil. Sometimes things are validated where you can dilute it and rerun it, right? To get it within the linear range. I know things in chemistry are like that, right? Aren't there certain assays in chemistry where you can dilute it and then rerun it to get it in the linear range? We don't have that in molecular.
We do that for glucose one.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't do that in molecular. It's just above the linear range. Maybe some labs do. We don't. It's not that important. If you're that high, you're that high. You got it. So again, you're establishing linearity, accuracy, all those good things. They need to be part of your validation plan. They need to be 99.5% or greater, or 95% or greater accuracy and precision. Like, yeah. Proficiency testing, cap samples, right? They're the best. So there's lots of things that can go wrong when you run a cap sample. Okay. What are some things that can go wrong when you run a cap sample? You don't know? You didn't mix it well enough. A, good job. Maybe yes, you contaminated. So we get cap surveys, and they come with a variety of viruses in one survey, right? Tube 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They say you're testing parvo on tube 1 and BCV on tube 2 and CMV on tube 3. What happens if somebody pulls the wrong tube and does the wrong viral target on it? Get the wrong answer, I can tell you that. Okay, so chances are, don't do that. Okay, don't do it. Pay attention. Double check your labels, right? Sad things happen when that happens. You get a bad camp answer, and then you have to write a whole investigation and do a whole lot of paperwork for somebody who didn't read a label. It's okay. Mistakes happen though. They give you time. They give you a chance to redo it. It's all good. If you get 2 wrong in a row, you're ixnayed for a hot minute until you prove that, like, you got it together again. You can crawl back out of the hole. It's all good. Just try not to do that. It makes life really difficult. If they don't have a cap survey available, what are you supposed to do? If they don't have, like, you're running something rare, Behance. Behance does not have a cap survey available for it. What are you supposed to do? How are you supposed to prove the cap when they come in and inspect you that you're actually getting good results? If you can't buy a known thing from cap, you could make your own. It's called an alternative proficiency test, APT. You make your own. So somebody orders a test and you label it under a competency account, and you pull a previous positive and a previous negative and hope it repeats. And cross your fingers. Behance is very persnickety because it's usually in very, very low levels as well. So we also do it for factor 13, which is significantly easier, but factor 13 isn't a common thrombophilia marker that gets genetic testing, so they don't offer a cap survey for it. So we just pull previous specimens and run them and ensure that we get the same result. And that's how we prove that we're proficient. And it's somebody who shouldn't have run it the first time. Just FYI. Okay, so if Joe Schmo ran it, it should be Susie Q who runs it this time. It should be a different tech. Now the question is, what if there's only one tech? You got to do what you got to do, right? Like, because our lab only used to be 2 techs. So it was very hard before COVID to necessarily pull something that somebody else didn't already run, like you yourself didn't run. So got a little hairy sometimes, but it's okay. So controls. Quality controls are samples of known type and amount that are treated and run with patient samples. We talked about the positive extraction control. We talked about the negative extraction control. Qualitative controls, those are our positives and negatives. Quantitative controls, high, mid, low, right? Negative. We have our analytical measuring ranges. We have our standards that we run, 1 through 4, that are known exact values. Okay. There's lots and lots of controls in the molecular realm. Recognize them. Please pass. Yes. Do you ever have an analyzer that just sucks at life?
Yeah.
Yeah. You just pray to God, you're like, please just work for me today. We have one of those. 3 of the same one and all 3 stuck? Don't get. No. Oh my God. Where's this instrument at? Okay. Yeah. I bet you do this all the time then.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a fun time. Any plans to replace the instrument?
It's new.
Oh, no. So is our mnemonics. It's a great time. Ah.
And sometimes it's the full machine, sometimes it's just one part of the machine. So sometimes we'll have, because it's chem and IM,
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes we'll have out of 3 machines, one that's working fully, one only chem, one other only IM, but we don't have, all of them have all the same tech either. So like if one machine's down that does our hepatitis and we don't have it on any of the other machines, that's like down, we can't run hepatitis. It'll fit.
Do you send it out anywhere?
We
We
can.
Usually we just freeze it for a day until service.
Yeah. So usually service comes in the next day. Never that day.
Well, I'm sure you work second shift.
Yeah.
Of course. They work like normal people hours for the most part. Yeah. I'm sorry. I know the feeling. It sucks. Yeah. Yeah. I did that a lot with our mnemonics instrument. It's all cartridge based. So I literally would take the pipette tip and pierce it like all these little holes and then try to pipette it into this tiny little like hole. And if anything was ever like slightly misaligned, it would fail. And it's only injecting like 2 microliters of something in there. So if it's like misaligned, it's like, oh my God. So terrible. It's okay. It's good. We only get 2 COVIDs a day now, so I don't care. Controls. So for amplification procedures, amplification controls are required, right? Those are the internal controls we talked about. Quantitative PCR methods. They require a standard curve or a dilution series of a reference standard, but we have 4 separate ones. We don't delete them. We just buy 4 separate known ones because, you know, the more that the tech does, the more error that could happen and the more inaccurate things could be. So in methods requiring detection of a target, internal controls are run simultaneously, preferably in the same reaction mix with the specimen, right? We talked about all that good stuff. So QA, how are we assuring that everything is grand? Periodic review and documentation of test results are required. We do monthly review of all test results. So we look at positivity rates, we look at like of genetic tests and of infectious tests. Genetic tests we should be getting, like let's say the factor V line mutation is present in about 10% of the population, right? We should be getting similar results, right, as the rest of the United States, unless for some reason we know we're a hot pool of whatever mutation because of, you know, like the Amish population or whatever. Like they might house different mutations and we might get those patients more regularly than others because we do have a large Amish population here. Molecular quantitative methods should have defined dynamic range, sensitivity level, and accuracy. You need to define your range. It needs to be specified on your reports. Assay levels that distinguish positive from negative, cutoff values. We talked about that threshold. 0.2 is our CT threshold for a lot of things. We verify everything. Our standard curve gets verified twice a year. So how we verify a standard curve, we run every single standard, high, mid, low, all the standards, positive, negative, everything for every single viral target twice a year, and ensure that everything falls within, like, all on one run, to make sure everything falls within all the acceptability criteria. If it does not, we need to remake our standard curve. So, because there could be shifts, there could be decrease in fluorescence over time. Something's wrong with the instrument. It's not cycling optimally. Maybe we see a trend. We monitor those things. We monitor shifts and trends of all our CTs day to day. We do it at the end of the month as a monthly review. I'm not looking at it every day. I don't have time. But I look at it at the end of every month. We plot it on a graph to see Westgard rules. We don't follow like Westgard rules in molecular, but we do look at the same trends, right? So we review QC shifts, trends, all of that good stuff. We document corrective action if there needs to be. If a QC was out, how do we fix it? Do we rerun it? Do we do what? Like, there are different things. Maybe instrument needs maintenance. And then review procedures to make sure that they're current. Instrument maintenance, manufacturers supply recommendations for a maintenance routine, right? They say, daily you need to do this, weekly you need to do this, monthly you need to do this, annually we'll come out for a PM. Maybe it's biannually they come out for a PM, right? You need to make sure that you're doing that if it's part of your SOP, right? Clean it, do it. It's part of your job. There are limits of user recommended repairs when service calls are indicated, right? So like you might call and they might be like, tweak this. And you might be like, okay, I don't know what you're doing, but all right, okay, sit down with home with me. I gotta do this. I don't want to mess it up. But they'll come out if it's like something that you can't fix. Absolutely call them. Don't try to fix something on your own if it's outside of like your general training. Okay. Even if they're on the phone walking you through it and saying, hey, like, try it. Like, you can do this. Even though you don't know how, here, try it. They will do that sometimes so that they can save a few $1,000s so they don't have to come out and spend time at your place. Regular calibration, okay? We do that too. Use reagents. There's always that one tech who thinks they can fix the analyzer. And it makes it worse. Okay? There's always one. Maybe there's two. I don't know. 5. Follow the procedure manual that comes with your instrument. Follow your SOPs. Follow guidance from the service techs, and then let service handle it. Right? Don't just leave it. If something is easily fixable, don't leave it on somebody else to fix it. Right? And discover that the instrument's jammed, or like, you know, it's out of reagents, or your QC failed, but you don't feel like dealing with it right now. No, don't do that. Fix it. Okay? Be respectable. But also, don't just start pushing buttons without knowing what you're doing. Okay? Test results. Results from images should clearly be visualized. High quality bands, peaks, minimal artifacts, and distortions. Controls should be clearly visualized and reflect expected results. Identification of technologists on the reporting results. You need to know who did it. Okay? Reporting. You need to do it in terms that people can understand. We have computerized reporting methods, right? We just blow in a result. It blows in everything for our pre-made reports. I'm sure you're all familiar with the same thing, right? Sometimes we will have to make custom reports when there's a random mutation that we can't define, right? That happens for us. I don't think that really happens in a CCO, right? You don't really do custom reports, right? I don't know. I haven't worked in a CCO. This is your glucose. Merry Christmas. I don't know. But yeah, it does happen that we do custom reports. If we have to do a custom report, it should be written in such a way that they're understandable to the readers. They should include a method and a kit used, locus, mutation, organism tested, interpretation, clinical interpretation, a disclaimer for false positives or false negatives, and patient confidentiality. So here's an example of a worksheet. Everything's on paper right now. Beaker's coming. Hopefully it'll all be great. Molecular. Okay, so this is somebody's competency. So we are checking if it's a quantitation or not quantitation. My 2 specimens, these are competency accounts. So these do not have patient information on them. So don't harass me. Be like, oh my God, there's patient sticker on it. It's competency account. Okay. We report our internal control here in this range, right? Did we amplify? Here's the acceptable range. 24.59 to 29.55. We look at it. Our QS standards do not get extracted. Those are quantity standards. We run them straight so that we know what the quantity is. So they do not get an internal control. An internal control gets added during extraction. This does not get extracted, and our negative water control, our NTC, does not get extracted. That is okay. That is valid that they don't have one because none was ever added. Okay. So again, we have our internal controls. This arrow should be right here. External controls, right? Here's our control. It's our easy number 2 control, easy number 2 control. It has the CMV, EBV, and BK viruses in it mixed together, but when we PCR them, we PCR them separate. Here's our viral load, right? This one's positive. We got a CT of 33.34. A CT is the crossing threshold. When we talk about, remember that amplification curve or the cycle time? It could be either. They're interchangeable. They mean the same thing. We went through 10 cycles. It crossed this threshold at cycle 10.2, right? Like, so it'll give a CT, what cycle number it crossed at, and then it'll give a viral load based on your QS standard and the imported standard curve. So our controls have defined ranges. Here's our acceptable ranges for CTs for our controls. Do we have for CMV our low AMR 33.78, 33.78? That does fall within the acceptable limits. Great. Check. Okay. The high AMR, that's this one, 26.90. Does that fall within our acceptable range? Check. Right? Great job. Our QS standard for CMV, does that fall within our acceptable range? Yes. Check. I can sign out all of my CMV test results now. Even if my EBVs fail, I can still sign out my CMVs. Okay, my CMVs worked. Beautiful. Check plus. Okay, we can now move on to the next target and analyze and see. Also, was my negative water actually negative? Yes. Yeah. You gotta check that too before you sign out results. Okay. So then you can go on to your EBV. 35.83. Was it acceptable? Yes. Okay, my high AMR, 21.97. Yes. My QS standard, QS2, was 26.56. Yes. Okay. So my negative was actually negative. Beautiful. I can sign out my patient result. Okay. This is what the amplification curves look like off the instrument. Okay, for our infectious disease testing. The yellow channel is our internal control. The green channel is our viral load. And then this is CMV and this is BK for our viral load. So I got all these check marks everywhere. Okay, so our internal control, they're there except for the ones that are negative, right? This one, that looks a little funky. It doesn't look nice and sigmoidal like the rest. Why do you think that might be? I look at that. Look at that guy. And it's like, what we got here? That's this guy. What we got right here? It's a very high what? Channel. What's this guy? It's got a very high viral load. Okay, your internal control isn't going to amplify as great because it's using some of it, some of the DNTPs and stuff. So you're going to see a decrease in internal control. Your high AMR does go through extraction. It's just not your QS standards that do. You can see here, here's our specimen. 7, we have a low AMR. Okay, 35, that's this guy. And we have our high AMR. That's this guy. You can see we have spanned our measuring range, right? We have a high viral load, we have a low viral load. We have lots of in-betweens. Yes? So we want to make sure that we are getting values within our linear range. Here's a report. Here's the overall result. Here's the viral load. We report it in international units per mil and log. Okay. Here's our method. We use amplification with fluorescent protection using RealStar ASR BK virus reagents from Altona Diagnostics. The quantitative range is 300 to 6 billion. Okay. This is for BK. Our viral load is real high. Okay. We also report it in logs. Again, here's that comment that says this test was developed and its performance determined by Akron Children's Hospital. That's a CYA. Clear required. We have the specimen type, his urine, the order ID, the collection information. All that goes on the final report. Here's our competency worksheet documentation. What was our previous result? Okay, that was terrible writing. Can't even read that. 30.96 was the result before. 29.48, okay, 30.96. You can have a CT difference plus or minus 2. So does that qualify as repeatability? Yes, check, beautiful, right? Competent. You have to have all of these parts of a competency document. You need to have somebody directly observing you. Doing maintenance checks on the instrument, directly observing you, doing patient testing, directly observing you, like doing the reporting, reviewing the results. Like, did you review it? Did you check that all your QC was good, right? You have to do problem solving skills, and you have to have like a split sample or a cap sample or something. So it's a good time. It's a true statement. People are like, I'm a supervisor, I have medical, they're like, Dr. Bonvissuto, I'm not a doctor. I do not want that kind of responsibility. No, don't want that kind of responsibility. The other thing that we do that I wanted to add to this lesson, so please take a note in the slide. We do what's called wipe testing. This is another way that we monitor the lab. Have you heard of wipe testing before? No, we do it twice a year or more frequently if indicated. Wipe testing, what we do is we take a little swabby do and we swab each of the areas that we perform testing in, right? And then we PCR it. So we'll swab the pipetty doos, we'll swab the hoods, we'll swab the instruments, we'll swab it all. Okay, and then we go through extraction and PCR and all that. And if something comes up positive, what do we have to do? Decontaminate. Oh, the bane of my existence. And yeah, so we do it twice a year to make sure that like we're maintaining whatever. But if there's an indication, like a positive actin beta on a B-HENS test, or a negative control, we have to do it then too. So I just want to get rid of B-HENS. You can tell I don't like it. So wipe testing twice a year to meet requirements or as needed due to signs of contamination, right? Any questions on that? They do wipe testing in micro. They also do wipe testing in spaces that use radioactive material, like our lead testing and things like that. Yeah. Does that make sense? You want to make sure you're not contaminating yourself with radioactive material, microorganisms, DNA, right? You just want to make sure you're clean. That's the only other thing that I wanted to add to the QA lecture. Because that's important.